Hi everyone, thank you for tuning in to the JPIS fundraising live stream. This is a quick reminder for you to click the link in our description box and donate to our COVID-19 crowdfunding campaign in association with Give India, Uplift, DCI Alumni Feb 2021, and the Ojala Foundation. Today we have amongst us a faculty member of the Electrical Engineering Department at MIT, the dream university for every computer science enthusiast. His works in secure computation, cryptography, and data privacy. Likewise, his wise and inspirational personality will blow your minds. Without further ado, we would love to introduce Professor Debayan Gupta. Divyansh, would you like to take off from here?
Absolutely. So, Debayan, the first question I would like to ask you is most of us growing up, even our generation is not too different from our previous generations in assuming that becoming doctors, engineers, lawyers, accountants, public service officers, because there's this because there's a certain specificity and certainty and security that comes with these mainstream jobs, right? All of us want to become that. But take us to the time when you were in high school and what was your mentality and how you were thinking and what propelled you towards your career in academics, and which is a career which with the exception of a tenured position which is incredibly hard to get, is a career riddled with uncertainty and insecurity.
Um, I think you'll find my answer either very helpful or very unhelpful. There's no middle ground there, really. I didn't choose my career as such. I both hated and enjoyed schooling. I hated everything to do with it's a standing joke in my family that I'm an academic. I absolutely despised every subject. If it was outside syllabus, I was fine reading it. I'd read anything I could get my hands on as long as it was not in the syllabus. If it was in the syllabus, forget about it. As far as I recall, I passed my 12th grade examinations with my chemistry textbook still shrink wrapped. Like it was purchased for me. I had not yet opened the shrink wrap until after the exams were over. Parents were not happy about that. But fortunately, I had enough good friends who gave me enough of their notes so that I could study properly. And I got good grades, right? So that should, and I tell you right now that until at least about last year, I knew jack about chemistry, right? So that should really tell you how useful grades are as a measure of knowledge, right? I just mugged stuff and regurgitated it, and that was good enough to get me reasonably good grades, right? Not like 99s, but mid 80s, early 90s in all sorts of pretty much everything, right? But I was never really very satisfied with whatever I was doing at school. I don't want to blame my school for that. Like my school, like some people you usually say, oh, the teachers weren't good. My school was great. They did a lot of stuff. I think there's something deeper about our schooling system that just doesn't work for many people. It didn't work for me. I did not like learning in that environment, right? You leave me alone with some stuff to tinker about. Tell me, go make an animatronic horse or something. I'm happy to play around. I would fail, presumably, because building an animatronic horse sounds like a very difficult thing to do. But I'd have fun trying and I'd learn a lot, all right? But the moment it was in the confines of some sort of project, under some sort of syllabus, no way were you going to learn anything, right? However, the way I chose my subject, that is computer science, basically, was because it was what I hated least. I literally looked for, it was very, very logical, actually. I piled up all the textbooks of different subjects and I chose the shortest pile. And it so happened that CS was the shortest pile in the lot. Fortunately, it turned out I was pretty good at it. The first time I really started learning anything, at least at the end of school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I think if I hadn't gone into CS, I would probably have gone into either history or physics. I don't know. I'm pretty good at both of those subjects still. A lot of the work I do even now has got to do with understanding critical points in society. If you are interested more in that vague statement, I'm happy to talk about it later. But yeah, it was, even during college, I wasn't very certain. I was getting good grades because I had an opportunity to study what I wanted. I ended up doing very well in college. And then for my postgraduate studies, so after my bachelor's degree, I ended up getting into Yale for a PhD, and that's when I really started studying, right? And I want to change that word actually. That's when I really started exploring. Because until then, studying was exactly what I was doing. I had been told, Debayan, you have to do this in order to get that other thing, right? And I think that was the first time when I was 21, 22 years old, right? So I'm now 32. So this was 10 years ago. When I was 21, 22 years old, that was literally the first time when I was doing something, not because it would lead to a particular desired outcome. I was doing something because I liked doing it, right? And I think that's incredibly important, because otherwise, especially with the kind of pressure you have now, you will burn out, right? Why are you studying for IIT JEEs, let's say, or to get into the IITs to do what? Oh, study more with more competition. And you're studying that in order to get a job with more competition. And then you're doing something so that you think the people at the job are going to be any easier, because the other people who got in there got in through the same competition system. All right. So it takes a while to break yourself of that habit. I was lucky enough to get into an environment eventually where I did manage that. But yeah, even that, like this was not some sort of clever choice. This was something I kind of walked into.
It's beautifully put how you involuntarily walked into the right path. And it segues perfectly into my next question, that, when you went to America to, let's say, to begin the initiation of your involuntary exploration, what are some three main learnings, let's say three main learnings that you gained as a young student in America, dealing with culture shocks and, settling into a new culture altogether?
I actually had zero culture shock. I don't know why that is. People kept telling me you'll have lots of culture shock. I think urban India is pseudo-Americanized enough that I didn't really have that much of a culture shock. The only piece of culture shock I really had was birthday presents. They like on somebody's birthday, it is really not expected that you get them presents. Or if they invite you to a restaurant, let's say it's my birthday, I invite the two of you along with 5 other friends to a restaurant, I'm not paying, even though it's my birthday. And that just completely blew my mind. It turns out what usually happens is that's the gift. All of you pitch in to pay for me. And first time that happened, I wanted to punch the guy in the face, but like, whatever. But I think I'll tell you what the learnings have been with some hindsight, actually. So the first, I mean, people talk about cultural differences. There is one cultural difference, since you mentioned it, which has also been a learning for me. And I think that has a lot to do with actually just brand value stuff as well. Here's the basic point. I've moved around a lot of universities teaching classes here and there. One thing I've noticed that is a problem with Indian university should be top of the world. We have some amazing, amazing people, right? It is a pathetic shame, and it is to our, we have only ourselves to blame for the fact that multiple Indian universities are not in the top 10 in the world, no matter what ranking you look at. I think you're still muted. And that's just sad. It shouldn't be the case. Like, these same people, they go abroad and they do fantastically well. And the people who stay in India aren't any stupider, right? They are equally clever. So what is going on? There's something clearly wrong with the structure there, right? I'm happy to talk more about what those things might be. I'm really not sure. I only have speculations. But one of those things that there's a feedback loop there is, I don't mean from the sound, sorry, system. There's a feedback loop there, which has to do with dedication and energy, right? So it's like this. Let's say you end up going to Stanford, right? You know, no matter who you are in the world, right? You know you are lucky to be there. You know that the people you're working with are all like shining beacons in the field, right? And what that means is you will be energized and ready to learn, and you will turn up to every single lecture and listen all the way, because you know you're never going to get that chance again, right? And that's something that's missing. I don't care which university you're at in India, half the students don't turn up, right? If I'm giving one lecture, then that's different, right? Because then it's a one-off event. Everyone's like, ooh, let's turn up and hear what this stupid fellow has to say. That's different. But semester-long lectures, there's a huge problem with energy and attrition. This is across India, and you can't blame anything else for that except these long-term effects of the system where people are not energized about learning, right? If you don't enjoy what you do, it's really hard to maintain discipline, internal discipline for yourself in that way. Oh, I want that super long-term goal, therefore I'm going to turn up to class every day. That's not easy. You have to love what you're doing every day, at least a little bit. And if you don't do that, you're going to slack off. And I see a lot of that happening in India. That's something I learned when I first went there. Like, I saw myself doing it, but I saw everyone else doing it as well. And I think that's a really important part of the learning experience. When you're around N other people who are always in there all the time, that's fantastic, right? It's like, oh, I heard that, there's a geologist. If I'm at dinner, there's a geologist sitting next to me, and she's like, hey, I heard there was this like discovery down in New Mexico. I'm taking a chunk out of my savings so I can drive down there and take a look at it. Right? And you know that she's passionate about what she does. And the other guy sitting next to me, he's an economist, and he's talking about his stuff. And there's another person who studies duck reproduction across me. That's an actual person, by the way. I'm not making these up. Who's thinking about his stuff. And it's that environment where everyone is excited to be doing what they are doing. And therefore, they are always turning up every single day. I mean, mentally, physically, with 100% energy, because they know there's never going to be another chance like this. That is something that's missing. And that was a learning for me about how much of your learning process is about the environment you're in. And I don't mean facilities. I don't mean even the quality of the people, right? I'm not saying I haven't met cleverer people in a university in India. I have. It is that energy. It is that passion. It's one. Point number two, I think if you, like, I only have 2 points. I can force a third one if you want, but I'll stop at two. Point number two is that I think there is a certain disdain in India and some other places about certain subjects, right? There is a certain hierarchy that we've built up. We've said that, okay, mathematics, physics, chemistry is at the top. If somebody wants to study English, let's say, or Bengali for that matter, a superior subject in every way, it's not quite at the top of that hierarchy, right? I think that's something we need to leave behind. That's one of the reasons why none of our institutes are near the top of any ranking anywhere. I'm not a very big believer in rankings. There's lots of problems with rankings. But no matter how noisy your measures are, if all your measures are telling you you suck, then you probably suck, right? And it is, let me put it from a simple job market angle. I think that'll help. If you look at my own field, if you look at the top 5 highest paying jobs right now, look at any statistical whatever measure, top 5, 10, most of them didn't exist 10 years back. 20 years, people hadn't even thought these jobs could exist. If you ask me what would be the highest paying jobs in 2021, 5 years ago in 2015 or 16, I would have given you wrong answers. I'd have said, oh, like just after a bachelor's degree, highest paying job would be what, AI specialist? Turns out nobody cares about AI specialist until you have a PhD. Doing AI just in undergrad is word zilch, because you don't have the knowledge to do anything really, right? Unless you do higher studies after that. But anyway, so it's like not word zilch, it's word something, but not much. So I'd have been wrong 5 years back. So we are training you in many cases for jobs that don't exist yet, that we can't imagine, where you'll need to reskill throughout your career. And so how are we deciding what the subjects of importance should be exactly? It is important to get this well-roundedness, this clarity of thought. I know it's super cliched, this how to think, not what to think phrase, but there's a reason that cliche is important. Right. And unless you get, reality doesn't care what labels we give subjects, right? It doesn't say that, ooh, you've called this physics and therefore, no, like after a certain point, it all mixes together and it's super hard to silo out. Right. And because our sensory understanding of the world is so complex, it is useful to approach the same problem from many, many, many different angles. Right. And I think that well-roundedness aspect, like, let me put it this way. If you had asked me, Debayan, do you think history, English, and anthropology are important subjects when I was in class 12? I'd have said yes on the outside and no on the inside. It's like, oh, those are kind of wishy-washy subjects and people, they don't really know that much. Quantum mechanics, now that's cool. I don't really understand it, but that looks like complicated stuff, right? That would have been my honest answer. It took me a while to get over that. And I think it's important to do so. Not everything needs to be complicated to be useful. And there's a lot of usefulness lying around.
Absolutely. And you talked about the importance of every single subject. And I love how you put it, that, every single subject does hold a specific place. And I just really wanted to ask you that there's this almost a rule of thumb that to be great in any field, you need to have at least 10,000 hours invested in that field through deliberate practice. I think it comes out of Malcolm Gladwell book. And so what do you think? Should people be ultra concentrated on one thing, or should they be renaissance people, like being multifaceted in various aspects of life?
I think people are different. I know exactly the question you're asking. I've thought about it before. The problem is there's so much out there. This is why I think this is why every really clever person I've ever met is, they pretend to be arrogant, but they're actually humble, if that makes sense. Because the more you know, it's like, think of knowledge as an island. And the more you know, it's like the circumference of that grows. So the more you're aware of the edge of your knowledge with ignorance. All right. If you know very little, you're like, oh, there's only this much that I don't know. As your knowledge grows, so does your understanding of your ignorance. I don't know. It's very different for different people. So for me, I'm a very sort of magpie personality. I'll see a problem that's shiny and I'll just go after it, right? I do have a balance that's worked out well for me. There are 3 or 4 major problems that I've just been thinking about in the back of my head for years on end. That takes practice. It didn't happen in a day, right? Most people, their attention spans are about 20 minutes. Okay, max. After 20 minutes of concentrating on something, people tend to zone out. That's why in a 40-minute lecture or class, you'll probably zone out about halfway for 5 minutes and then you'll come back. It's usually what happens to most people. It's completely natural, happens. If you're truly interested in something, you can go hours, right? But that usually involves some kind of interaction, right? That's why gaming is such fun, because you have that interaction. thinking about a problem, sort of leaving it there to simmer in your head for very long periods of time is very, very, very difficult, right? What I do myself is I find shiny things to work on, which is I have a set of tools that I've learned very, very well. That's the 10,000 hours you're talking about, right? That 10,000 hours is, there's no easy way around it. That's just hard work, right? Doesn't matter how clever you are. There's a lot of clever people out there, right? There's a tremendous amount of hard work is actually the wrong word to use for that. Focus is the right word, right? There's a tremendous amount of focus required for you to keep going and collating that information.
Could you please distinguish between your definition of hard work and focus? Because it kind of has a possibility.
Because I can bang my head against a wall and that might be hard work, but I'm not getting anything done.
Right.
Right. Focus has these underlying ideas of hard work with vision and sort of looking at a particular thing. Right. That you're aiming for something. Hard work can also just be busy work. Right. Yeah, so hard work aimed towards a particular purpose with discipline. That's perhaps a better definition. And you got to do that. That's table stakes. That's what you have to do to go to the big table and start talking to people. All right. But after that, what happens is some people end up choosing a particular set of problems to think about. And they attack that focused all the time. Right. And those people can get very, very, very good at what they do. Right. In my case, I found that I did not want to do that. I did that for a while. I did that for 4 or 5 years. I got a bunch of stuff written up, published a bunch of stuff. I was like, okay, I can do this, but I don't particularly enjoy doing it. Some other people, other than the people who just focus all the time, and they're fantastic, people like me, we branch out a lot. And I think that's because I enjoy not knowing and sort of then going from there to knowing. So it's like, it's very freeing for the ego. See, like if you ask me a question about cryptography and I don't know it, right? I'll feel bad. I'll be like, I'll make up a complex sounding answer. And I'll be like, you won't understand it yet, but wait for a few years. You'll need to learn blah, blah, blah math. And I'll give you a complicated thing just to hide my own ignorance. Why? Because if I don't know the answer to the question you're asking me, that means I must be stupid, ignorant, whatever. Ignorant is the right word there. But if I now start studying biology, I can be like, hey, I don't know anything. I'm just here to learn. That your ego is going to be the biggest problem in your learning.
The nothing attitude is best.
Yeah, so it's like I don't care if anyone thinks I'm stupid. It's like, yeah, I'm stupid. I don't know. I'm not stupid. I'm ignorant because I just entered the field. Can you teach me? And that's when you really get to learn, right? So, like I can tell you right now, I do a bunch of stuff in pure cryptography. I'm very interested in something that's known as multi-party computation. But as of now, I'm doing very large-scale modeling work for COVID-related stuff. I'm working on biological stuff for working with single molecule systems. Think using tractor beams to pick up individual proteins and stretching them out to see how they work. I'm working with physicists to see if we can use neural networks to try and solve certain restricted versions of the three-body problem. I'm working with psychologists and neuroscientists to see if we can exploit the way the brain works to have passwords that can't be given away. Right? Like, yes, there are certain linkages to my areas of expertise, sure. But I see what I have learned as a useful lens through which to understand the world. And what I do is I improve that lens and I collect more lenses. That's sort of the way I look at it.
Yes, Debayan, first of all, thank you so much for mentioning the relentless dedication that is required in each and every field that a person is going to be immersed into. But there is always this preconceived notion of such dedicated and I would say academically charged people being these socially awkward, monotonous, and egocentric and very self-absorbed individuals who only care about their work and nothing else. And in many of these cases, in some of these cases, it might have been seen to be true because these people many a times they aren't able to showcase their love for someone, even if they undividedly love them.
I get it, Sheldon
So,
Cooper.
yeah, very much,
Yeah.
pretty much
No,
that
so
is.
so I'll tell you my theory behind it. I had part of that. I was like expecting, oh, I'm going to go into this, especially when I started doing crypto. So I didn't enter when I started my PhD. I wasn't in cryptography. I was experimenting on babies. That sounds much less exciting than what it actually was. What I was doing is I was in AI and robotics actually, and I was developing small robots that would play with babies on the autism spectrum, mainly toddlers, not babies, on the autism spectrum, in order to train them to make eye contact. So a counselor or a psychologist or a doctor would tell the robot what to do, and the robot would use, animatronics and dancing around and words and stuff to try and train the child to make eye contact as often as possible. And the idea was this would help in the long run, because once you lose that period of development where you're learning to make eye contact and doing so naturally, you lose a lot of stuff. That was fun. But then I got really interested in cryptography. This is around the time the Snowden affair happened. And definitely when I started getting into crypto, I had expectations. I was like, I'm going to walk into a room, there's going to be 11 like uber nerds standing around doing complicated looking math. I did not find anything of the sort. In fact, if you want to find a correlation, it would be fitness freaks. A stupid amount of computer scientists know some martial arts or the other. And I think that there's some sort of spatial intelligence correlation or something there, because there's a very large number, especially in computer science, who are into either carpentry or sculpting or martial arts, something to do with understanding locations and space and how they interact with each other, that sort of thing. People in these fields are like people anywhere else, right? Some are fat, some are thin, some are fitness freaks, some like rowing. It's like anywhere else. In fact, I will tell you that if you look at, here's an easy way. Go pick 20 professors from any top university in the world, right? Don't go for the aged ones who are full professors. Don't go for the super young ones who are assistant professors. Go for the middle-aged ones, the associate professors. Go look up their profiles and see how they look, right? You're not going to find too many like obviously nerdy people. They're going to look normal, just like everyone else, right? I think I know where that comes from. This idea of people being like super nerdy and incapable, blah, 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 of basically pseudo autistic, right? That's what you're looking for. You'll see that in Sherlock as well, for example. And I think that's a Hollywood issue, not a human issue. It's a Hollywood issue in the sense that, let me put it this way. If you have a character that is better than the viewer in every way, then the viewer isn't going to like it, right? If there's a character on screen that's like cleverer, more fit, and has better luck with the opposite sex, let's say. So usually what used to happen is, for a while, you used to make that character gay. But then homosexuality became A-okay, and then you had to make them autistic. It's basically a way to make the viewer feel better. It's like, oh, this character is cleverer than you and has all these awesome skills, but yeah, he or she is very socially awkward. So, you can feel better about that thing about yourself. That's probably the reason. Otherwise, people there are like people anywhere else. They are dedicated, certainly, but so are stockbrokers. You know what I mean?
Definitely. That's so good to know that people are people. I just wanted to bring you back to the state of academia in India, because since you mentioned that in your answer, I can't get it off my head. And how do you think we can tackle the issue of getting people to get excited about the universities they're attending in India, and to really relish their opportunities that they've gotten, which are much more privileged than anybody else on the street? How do we tackle that?
It's hard. If I knew it, I'd have done that already. I think it has to do with part of it has to do with just brand value, right? If you're attending some university, or forget university, if you're at a place, whether that's a research institute, university, company you're working at, whatever, where you know that people across the world are trying super hard to get in, and you got in, and you're going to have imposter syndrome. You're going to be like, I can't believe I got in, right? That's when you start getting that energy. After a while, you realize everybody has imposter syndrome. Everyone's faking it till they make it. But it's some of it is just that brand value. And unfortunately, most institutes in India just do not have that. Not the ISCs, not the IITs, nobody. Right. The other is a kind of, the other, I'll be frank, is core research. Right. You can't think of it from the point of view of a professor teaching a first-year undergrad something. It's like, if I'm doing that, I've taught that 50 times before. It is going to be unbelievably boring for me. Unless there is that human excitement. I know you're excited to learn, and therefore I'm excited to teach you. Right? And I can showcase what's going on right now. If I'm teaching you stuff from 10 years ago, then I've probably been teaching the same stuff for the last 10 years. And then that's kind of useless. What I need to do is teach you what's happening right now. Then it's new, then it's interesting, then it's fresh. And that requires research. There is far too little. There can be a few teaching universities which are good, but you need truly exceptional teachers for that. They exist, but that by the definition of the word exceptional, they are few and far in between. Most universities otherwise are going to need professors and teachers who are researchers. They're going to need to be at the cutting edge of their fields. That isn't possible unless you support them and bring the best people in. How do you support these people and bring the best people in? Invest significantly more in core research. Core stuff. I'm not saying stuff that gets you dollar value out. I'm saying pay someone $1 million to go think about the origin of life, that sort of thing. The US has done remarkably well along those lines. That's one of the reasons for its scientific heavyweight nature, right? Along with that comes a simple truth. Our society today is a fairly capitalistic one. There's no way to get around that, okay? If you look at various kinds of, it doesn't matter which religion you look at, really, Judaism, Hinduism, Islam, whatever, right? There'll be some sort of thing that, being rich isn't all that important. It's like if you have a person who's old versus a person who's rich, so more age, more money, more knowledge, right? And more physical strength, right? What order should you put them in? And usually it's something like this, depending on, but usually what happens is, sure, the other three are in some order, but the person with the most knowledge should be on top. That is the person to whom you should show the most respect, etc. But we all know that's Jack, right? If right now you were told that there's a room in there with, let's pick actual people. Who's the richest person in India right now? I guess Mukesh Ambani. Let's pick Ambani. Let's pick someone who's, I don't know, who's the best architect in India. It says something about me that I don't know. Right?
Builders, I guess.
Yeah. So then, pick 3-4 such people. If I put you in that room, who are you most likely to suck up to?
The billionaire.
Yeah, I know who that is. Exactly. Right. So we live in a capitalistic society, and unfortunately, our mind has been molded by that. I would like to change that, but it's a truth that is not changing anytime soon. You put different people from top fields in the room together, you won't show them as much respect as you show the billionaire. I guarantee it. Sure, there's one rare person in 100 who's obsessed with something, who'll go to the geologist or whatever. It's different. But in general, that money's where the respect is. If you want the best people in research, which is what springboards knowledge, right? Like, you put $1 into agriculture, you get maybe $2 back. You put $1 into ISRO, you get like $5,000 back. Okay. You got to put in more money. You got to pay people more, right? If you look at the department heads of, let's say in CS, if you look at a department head in a top university, let's say Stanford or something, or MIT or Yale or Oxford or whatever, these people are paid like mid-level CEOs, right? Their salaries are not small. Now, if we want to improve education, you can tell me all the tales you want. At the end of the day, I'll tell you, we live in a capitalistic society. We live in a system where respect, unfortunately, is correlated with how much money you have. It's a fact. I would like to change that, but I can't change it right now. If you want to improve education, pay your teachers more. And this applies even more to K-12. It applies to university, yes, to a certain extent, but university professors are already relatively well paid. Right? We're not badly paid. What we need is more investment in research, not so as not to spend on ourselves, but on actual research. But K-12 teachers are not well paid. You need to get their salary one level of one order of magnitude greater. I'm talking 5 to 10 times more than what they're getting right now. Okay. Got to put your money where your mouth is. It's that simple.
Absolutely. And that raises a very good question of how badly compensated teachers are less motivated to, pass their energy, positive energy to the people who they are teaching. Debayan, we know you're a very busy man. So if it's not too big an imposition, can we ask you 2 final questions?
I'm free till 12:30.
Awesome. So you definitely brought up a point about how there are some very common grounds between various beliefs and how that can form an individual pursuing a variety of things. So there's been another preconceived notion, if you could bust that myth, that various academics are very logically oriented. They are very rational. They are not very inclined towards, let's say, the abstract or the mythological aspects of life, and how there might be, they're not providential in their beliefs. What do you think about that? If that's not too personal a question, or you can definitely choose not to answer it.
Yeah, it's stupid. People are people everywhere.
Right.
I mean, it's so first of all, I do want to answer a related question first, though. Because this is something that has changed in the last 57, not even that, 70 to 100 years. But people somehow haven't caught on, I think, which is sad. Science is not rational, it is empirical. This is critical to understand. Science looks for empiricism and then rational explanations for that empiricism. It is not rational first, it is empirical first. If people don't understand that, then they don't understand science. I can explain that just in a second. I think there's a very nice piece by Stephen Fry, one of my favorite actors. Stephen Fry, a little bit of Fry and Laurie. Love that show. If you look at, let's say, light, Pascal had a wonderfully rational theory of light. Okay, it was perfect in every way. It made sense. It's what rationality means. You have certain logical axioms and you work through them. Newton did an experiment to prove him wrong. Right? I mean, he wasn't trying to fight. It was that Newton did experiments that disagreed with Pascal. And that's how you do stuff. You don't say it. You don't rationalize. I'm double using that term. Do your experiment. Right? So, for example, saying that I don't understand how that works, therefore it cannot be, is not a good scientific phrase. Right? So if you're interested in, let's say, let's pick something that's controversial enough, homeopathy, right? And you want to figure out whether homeopathy works, you don't say, I don't see how, like all of these people who say, they may be right, but they're being unscientific. If they say, oh, I don't understand. Well, what is this stupid stuff? Memory of what? No, that can't be right. There's too little stuff in the water or alcohol to be meaningful. Whether that statement is right or wrong is irrelevant. It is unscientific. Science says, okay, you want to do that? Fine. Take 50,000 people, take 50,000 other people, do an experiment. Do a proper randomized control trial. Then do 5 more. And then maybe, just maybe, you'll begin to understand what's going on. And it's not that simple. When people say that science says blah, it's usually the experiment that was done is something quite different under restricted circumstances, right? So it's like if someone tells you, here's a medicine that works, what does it do? Oh, for people who have vision loss, it can help arrest that vision loss. And it has been scientifically proven. What does that mean? Let's think it through. What it means is somewhere in the world, let's say a decade or 2 ago, let's take a random country, Brazil, there was a medical experiment done where they took 25,000 people and 25,000 other people, all with varying degrees of vision loss. They gave the real medicine to 25,000 randomly, and they gave a placebo, just sugar water or whatever, to the remaining 25,000, and saw how they developed. And they found a statistical difference that was large enough to indicate that the medicine was probably doing something, compared to the null hypothesis of the medicine not doing anything, right? And they did that experiment. 5 years later, somebody else probably did another experiment that showed it had some side effects in something else, but they had a different sample size in a different country. And then some of these experiments started piling up, and then you got scientific consensus saying this medicine probably works, right? It is hard to prove stuff scientifically. It takes years of work. Just because one study says something does not mean it's true, right? The reason we're, let's say, sure about global warming is not because one study said it's true. It's because there's 10,000 different studies that are all kind of sort of pointing in the same direction. It's like, ooh, this guy studying bird migration patterns realized that, wait, temperatures must be rising. This guy looking at tree rings realized, wait, temperatures must be rising. This woman who's digging into the Arctic realized temperatures must be rising. This person who's studying seaweed realized temperatures must be rising. That's how you get a consensus. Individual experiments or studies are almost entirely useless. It is in their togetherness that you get scientific fact. And even that may change. So I'll give you something concrete. Something that's happening in India right now, which is kind of sucky. Just because COVID is happening doesn't mean other diseases aren't happening. Stents, heart stents, right? They've been in the news because the government's been trying to regulate their costs, right? They were used massively in the US for a while because they were very intuitive. It's like, oh, there's a pipe and that's gotten clogged and we're going to put a stent through it so the stuff can flow. It's like, oh, of course it works. Turns out it doesn't actually work that well, right? There's plenty of evidence showing, despite individual anecdotal cases, because anybody has a selection bias in remembering what worked and what didn't work. It's like when you're driving and you always get a bunch of green lights, you don't remember those green lights. But on the one day when you hit every red light, you're like, why do I always hit every red light? Because you don't remember the green ones. That sort of thing. it turns out that other than in very major, in a certain subset of cases, very major cases, generally stents don't actually help. In fact, that they hinder. And you can look this up. There's been plenty of articles in the New York Times talking about collated research on this topic, that this overuse of stents is probably killing a bunch of people. At the same time, in India, we're happily using stents all over the place, right? Both approaches are suitably scientifically supported. You'll find 10,000 papers, not 10,000, you'll find 50 papers supporting each idea. But what you have to do is collate all of that knowledge and then try thinking. Nobody said this was going to be easy. Science isn't like, boom, you do an experiment and now you know stuff. It's hard. It's like everything else. It's filled with ignorance and probabilities and sort of not knowing for sure. And maybe the experiment worked only because that particular area had people who drank water with higher iron than usual or whatever, right? It is very, very, very difficult stuff.
You mentioned that science is definitely difficult and it's almost no secret. And being an academic, you have to confront that fear in the eye. How did you get about training yourself and conditioning your mind to, not fear failure and difficulties that come along your study?
So here's a funny thing. You go to any, you should do this for fun. I guess you can't do it right now. Once this COVID stuff dies down a little bit, if you go to any big lecture hall or something, and where there's some sort of academic event or something of that sort happening, there'll be some like professors sitting somewhere, etc., near the front. What you'll find is that they're really sharp people, they're really clever professors, they're really successful ones, however you want to put it. Someone explains something and they're like, what's that? I don't get it. And it's usually like a really stupid question. And everyone's like, this guy's the clever dude? Like, are you kidding me? That's obvious, right? It's because they are secure enough in their knowledge that they don't care if someone else thinks they're an idiot. It doesn't matter. They know they're not stupid, so it doesn't matter. They are comfortable with themselves. And therefore, they're not afraid to ask when they don't understand something. Most people aren't. They look around and everyone's nodding around. It's like, okay, I kind of understand it. And then you convince yourself that you do without really understanding it. I can tell you right now that when I teach a class, it is usually a balance. I'm not worried about the information that I'm teaching, right? That used to be when I was just starting out. Then I'm like worried about, okay, in my lecture, I'll cover topics A, B, C, D. I don't worry about that anymore. I know what I'm teaching, right? What I'm worried about is the ego of the student. That's what I'm balancing against. I'll give you the honest balance. If I make my lesson too easy, right, the student will get convinced they understand and that they can catch up later and they'll zone out. All right. Because it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I get that. And if there's too many of I get that, they'll have the hard stuff and they'll just sort of nicely skip over it and continue. I get that. And they'll zone out in chunks in between, and that's it. And even if they don't get stuff, they'll be, it must be easy. I'll think about it later. Right? If I make it too hard, everything's going over everybody's head. And then you get even more zoning out. What you got to do is have it at that middle where it's in your reach, but not in your grasp, so to speak. Right? And that's where the ego breaks down. That's where the student is confident enough in his or her understanding to be able to ask questions, but also is aware of that gap in knowledge, because otherwise, why would you ask that question? Right? So you got to keep it right at the middle. And obviously in a large class, that's hard to do. You can pull a few tricks. So what you usually do is you prepare a simple explanation and then you tear out a chunk. So you're sure there's something missing. And if someone doesn't ask about that, you know that they're not listening. But it's really about, look, nobody is stupid now. right? Nobody's stupid, nobody's ignorant. All of us have the best lectures on every subject ever delivered accessible to us on YouTube. If you wanted, you could go look that up right now, but most of us haven't. Why? Right? So it's not my job to be like this conveyor belt of knowledge. That's useless. All right. So my job is to light fires and get out of the way, if that makes sense, which is I'm going to tell you that, look, you're here to learn ABCD. Here are the tools you need to learn them. Here are some of the interesting things around there. Now go learn. Right. And that way I get to cover a lot more as well.
Definitely. And as we run short on time, I have like 5 another questions. Every single thing you say just springs up more questions to ask. And I
Pretty
think
much, definitely. Like, first of all, thank you so much for sharing such beautiful notions. They have really been very, very insightful and very, very like brain chilling. Like, it's very inspirational to hear this such stuff from you. And I'm sure we can come up with thousands of such myths, and you can just burn them to their ashes and educate more us more on that with a much fuller picture. And there's really no apt way to detour from these logically philosophically apt concepts and discussions, but it's really time to give the viewers an answer for the $1 million question. What does it take for one to get into MIT, and how can someone just maximizes their chances of doing so?
Okay, here's the sad truth. It's a large part of it is just a numbers game. Okay, there's a lot of students who are incredibly good who apply, and one cannot take them all. This is true for every quote unquote good college in the world. A large part of it is just a numbers game. Nevertheless, I'll give you one piece of advice about your essay and one piece of advice about your background that you can build. Okay. And both, I'll try and sort of turn it around and show you sort of the university's point of view on both of these. Okay. A lot of people try to write essays that are saying the right things, let's put it that way. Okay. This is completely useless. Consider why. Think about it from the point of the view of the person who is reading the essay. Who is that person? That person is someone who reads thousands of essays, right? They bring in volunteers actually, along with a bunch of other people, but all of these people end up reading lots and lots of essays, right? I'll make this a binary choice. This is clearly not true, but I'll just make it simpler. These people who are reading these essays, are they stupid? Can they be duped? Or are they clever and they cannot be duped? Okay. Now, if you are applying to a good place, then you must assume that the person who's reading your essay is going to be a clever person who has read thousands of essays from all sorts of people. Yeah. That person is going to have, if you will excuse my language, an extremely advanced bullshit filter. If you lie, they're going to spot it. You really think, I don't care how arrogant one is, but you really think as an 18, 19-year-old, 17-year-old, whatever, you'll be able to come up with a lie that fools an admissions officer at one of the top universities in the world? And your essay goes through multiple people, by the way. Right? And these people are clever people who've read lots of essays. They've Googled what to write in those essays as well, because they're not idiots. Right? And remember, many times they'll give you prompts. So they've looked up those prompts online. Now, here's the counter question. If you can dupe them, suppose you lied about yourself and you got in. If you manage to dupe them, what does that tell you about that university? That tells you if you manage to dupe them, then a bunch of other people have probably managed to dupe them also. And you'll end up in a room with 50 other liars. That's not worth it. Right? So no matter which way you look at it, the game theoretic perspective is clear. Right? There is no point lying on your essay. And a lot of kids do. A lot of people end up just writing random stuff they think will impress people. And admissions officers are just not impressed by that, right? We don't want to see what you think will make us like, ooh, this person is so clever. You came first in your swimming competition. Who cares about some stupid swimming competition in some random country on the other side of the world? Nobody, right? We're not interested in some stupid competition. We're interested in you. What you're trying to make shine through your essay is your potential. That is, a university is saying, if we give you these resources, will you use this as a force multiplier to become much, much greater than what you are right now? That is the question being asked. And if you can show that you have that potential through whatever way, that's what we're looking for, right? So let's say if I use the example of a swimming competition, I'm not interested in whether you won or lost that swimming competition. I'm interested in what you learned about yourself and others through that victory. All right. So if you say that, oh, after I won that, you realized that victory didn't matter, but you also realized that if you had lost, you would still think that victory mattered. And that's why the victory was important. That meta thought, that's amazing. But winning a swimming competition, who cares? There's like 10,000 other people who've done that. No big deal, right? That's what we're looking for in your essay, potential. And also, by the way, people make this mistake about sort of writing their CV again in their essay. Please don't do that, right? Like, don't state facts in your essay. It's like, I love chemistry, that's useless, right? The other part is your background. And people ask a lot about this. What co-curricular activities can I do or whatever to make my background more interesting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That thing is not zero. It's not absolutely zero. I'm not going to say it's a total lie, but understand this. You're going to, if you're looking at any of the top places, you are going to be contending with people with literally Olympic records. Okay? Literally. Like there will be people, I have been in a classroom with more Olympic gold medals in it than India in its history. Right? So like, that stuff's difficult to compete with, right? So don't try competing on it by itself. It needs to be weaved into a story. The other side, the thing I was really pushing towards in your CV in terms of background, some of it, unfortunately, is, I mean, it's the hard truth, is contingent upon privilege. It just is. Right? Like if you're not at least at a certain level of, if you don't have some amount of money, you're probably not playing tennis. Let's put it that way. Right? So that's there. It's a fact. Right? If you don't have that, you are at a disadvantage. You'll need to make up for it in some other way. I don't like it, but that's reality. But in terms of all of this background stuff, the number one thing, absolute number one thing that can help you is an expression of that potential thing that I talked about. It is the following thing. You build skills, you find a problem around you that you truly care about, and then you do something about it. That's the story everyone's looking for, right? So you doing a project, meh. You figuring out that, hey, all of these recycling plants in my area don't do anything. They just dump it and build, and then sort of doing some legwork and working with someone else to sort of map out where all the trash in your city goes, and then trying to sort of deliver pamphlets to people to help them understand that. Even if you were totally unsuccessful, that's worth something, right? It is about, again, you know, it's one is potential, the other is direction. Let's put it that way. One is you have the potential to do stuff, and the other is you've tried. having potential is useless unless you sort of put it into practice, right? So if you can show us a history of trying, that's worth something. That, hey, I looked around and I noticed that all of the house stuff in our housing complex did not have provident funds. So you went around and I went around and I organized everyone and I sort of arranged their banking and I did this and I did that. And maybe it took you a month and that's it. But that's worth something. You saw a problem, you tried to solve it. You saw a problem, you tried to solve it, right? Those two are the two main things that one is looking for.
Definitely. And as much as we would want to hold on to you, and I'm speaking from personal experience, I just love watching you talk and just put complex topics into tiny packets of information just articulately. But we sadly have run out of time for this interview. And thank you so much, Debayan, for sparing the time to join us in the in this live conversation. Aryan, please remind the audience to donate, and then we can definitely say goodbye.
Surely, Divyansh. So thank you so much for tuning in again. And a quick reminder for everyone watching the JPS fundraising live stream, please click the link in our description and donate to our crowdfunding campaign. It would be very helpful. Be as generous as you want to if you want to. And otherwise too, every single penny counts. So even if it's a donation of 100 rupees, it matters. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you so much, Devayan.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Oh, you left?
Yes.
Stop recording. Stop recording.